Get down. The scream tore through the grand hall a fraction of a second before the gunfire exploded. Nina didn't think. She didn't hesitate. Her body moved before fear could stop her. She ran straight toward Adrian Romano, her arms wrapping around him with desperate force, slamming into his chest just as the first bullet struck her back. The impact jerked her body violently, but she didn't let go. A second shot rang out, then a third, then a fourth. Each bullet meant for Adrian tore into her instead. Her grip tightened instinctively, as if her body still believed it could protect him from everything the world had ever tried to take away. The force pushed them backward, her weight collapsing against him as the echo of gunfire shattered the elegant silence of the Romano mansion. Gasps filled the room. Crystal glasses shattered against marble floors. Someone screamed, someone ran, but Adrian heard none of it. He only felt the sudden warmth spreading across his shirt. For a moment, time stopped. Her body trembled in his arms. He could feel her heartbeat racing wildly against his chest, struggling to hold on to life that was slipping away second by second. Adrian caught her as she collapsed, lowering her slowly to the cold marble floor, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. Blood spread beneath her, staining the white stone in dark, unforgiving red. Then he saw her face, and everything inside him went still. His breathing stopped. His fingers froze against her shoulders. The world narrowed into silence so complete it felt like falling underwater. Nina. The name escaped him as a whisper, fragile and disbelieving. 8 years of anger, betrayal, and unanswered questions shattered in a single instant. Her eyes fluttered weakly, struggling to stay open. Pain trembled across her lips, yet there was something else there too, relief. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Adrian's voice broke for the first time in years. No, this isn't possible. You left. You said you chose a different life. Blood stained her uniform as her hand weakly clutched the front of his jacket, as though even now she was afraid of letting him go. I never stopped, she whispered faintly, her voice barely audible. The sound of footsteps, shouting, and distant gunfire echoed through the hall as Adrian's men neutralized the attacker. But Adrian did not look away from her. Not now, not after everything. His hand trembled as he pressed against the wound near her shoulder, trying desperately to slow the bleeding. Stay with me, he demanded, the command carrying none of its usual authority. Only fear, only desperation. You don't get to come back into my life like this, he said, his voice tightening as years of buried pain broke through the surface. You don't get to disappear, and then die in my arms without telling me why. Her lips parted slightly, struggling for air. I had to, she whispered. Adrian shook his head, disbelief and anger colliding inside him. You told me you didn't love me, he said, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable. You wrote that I would destroy your future, that I wasn't worth the life you wanted. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, mixing with the pale color draining from her face. I lied, she breathed. The words struck harder than the bullets. Adrian felt something inside his chest fracture. Why? He demanded quietly, his forehead lowering closer to hers, as though proximity alone could force time to slow down. Her fingers weakly tightened in his jacket. To save you. Her strength faded as her hand slipped, leaving a faint streak of blood across the fabric of his suit. Adrian swallowed hard, his composure collapsing beneath the weight of everything he had believed for 8 years. Don't close your eyes, he said urgently, his voice low but shaking with urgency. Not now. Not after you finally came back. Her breathing weakened, uneven, fragile. I never left, she murmured faintly. Her weight pressed against him as if she were already slipping away. No. The words left his mouth before he realized he was speaking. Her head fell against his shoulder, her breath shallow, uneven. He could feel the tremor of pain traveling through her body, each weak movement sending another wave of blood across his hands. Then the silence shattered. Someone call emergency services, a voice shouted from across the room. Adrian's composure broke completely. No, he thundered, his voice louder than anyone in the hall had ever heard. Panic sharpened every syllable, raw and uncontrolled. Someone help her! Someone call a medic, now! The authority in his voice carried desperation that did not belong to the man known for absolute control. Call emergency rescue. Do something, he shouted again, his hand pressing desperately against the wound near her ribs, trying to slow the steady warmth spilling between his fingers. Guests stood frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing violence or something more personal, something far more dangerous than bullets. Security rushed forward, surrounding the scene, weapons drawn, scanning for additional threats. One guard confirmed the attacker had been neutralized. Another spoke urgently into a communication device, coordinating immediate lockdown procedures. But Adrian did not look at any of them. His entire world had narrowed to the fragile life slipping through his hands. "Nina, stay with me," he said hoarsely, lowering his forehead closer to hers as if proximity alone could hold her consciousness in place. Her lashes trembled faintly. Her breathing was shallow, fragile. The sight of her like this fractured something inside him he had not allowed himself to feel for nearly a decade. "Look at me," he urged, his voice breaking in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew him. "You don't get to leave again. Do you hear me?" Her lips parted slightly, but the effort seemed to cost more strength than she had left. "I'm here," she whispered weakly. Adrian shook his head, disbelief mixing with rising anger at everything he did not yet understand. "You left," he said quietly, pain sharpening each word. "You walked away and told me I wasn't worth the future you wanted." Blood continued to spread beneath her, staining the white marble floor in widening patterns. Her fingers weakly tightened against the front of his jacket. "I never stopped," she murmured. Her voice almost lost beneath the noise of distant shouting. He felt the words strike deeper than any bullet could reach. Sirens began to echo faintly beyond the estate gates, but Adrian's instincts moved faster than protocol. "Prepare the medical wing," he ordered sharply to the nearest guard without lifting his eyes from Nina. "Immediately." "Yes, sir." "Clear the west corridor. I want surgical staff ready before we arrive." Within seconds, the well-trained structure of the Romano estate activated like a living organism responding to injury. Communication signals moved rapidly through hidden channels, summoning private medical personnel already stationed nearby for emergencies. Adrian carefully shifted Nina into his arms, lifting her as though the slightest miscalculation could cost her life. Her body felt far too light, frighteningly fragile compared to the memory of the woman who had once argued fiercely about trivial things like which film to watch or what kind of music should play in the car. As he carried her toward the private exit, her head rested weakly against his chest. Her breath brushed faintly against his collar. "You shouldn't have come back like this," he said under his breath. The words meant only for her. "Not after making me believe you chose a world without me." Her eyelids fluttered slightly. "I never chose that world," she whispered faintly. The words barely reached him, yet he felt them settle heavily inside his chest. Outside, a black vehicle already waited with the engine running. Daniel opened the rear door before Adrian reached the steps. "How bad?" Daniel asked quickly. 4 shots, Adrian answered. 1 close to the heart. Daniel's expression hardened immediately. The vehicle accelerated before the door fully closed, tires cutting across the gravel drive as the estate gates opened without delay. The distance to the private medical wing normally took several minutes, but tonight every second carried the weight of consequence. Adrian pressed one hand gently but firmly against the bandage improvised from part of his torn sleeve, attempting to slow the bleeding. "Stay awake," he said quietly, the command carrying none of the cold authority he used in business negotiations. "You don't get to disappear again without telling me the truth." Her breathing trembled. "You hated me," she murmured weakly. His jaw tightened. "I convinced myself I did," he admitted, the words almost unfamiliar to him. "It was easier than believing I wasn't worth staying for." A faint trace of pain crossed her expression. "I was protecting you." The confession struck deeper than logic could immediately process. Before Adrian could respond, the vehicle came to a sharp stop. Medical staff waited at the entrance, already prepared with equipment. The moment the door opened, Adrian stepped out carrying her, refusing assistance until the surgical team guided her carefully onto the waiting stretcher. "Gunshot trauma," Adrian said, his voice returning to controlled precision as he forced himself back into leadership. "Significant blood loss." Dr. Helena Ward moved swiftly beside the stretcher, assessing wounds with practiced efficiency. "We need immediate surgery," she confirmed. "Do whatever is necessary," Adrian replied. Helena met his eyes briefly, recognizing something she had rarely seen in him before: fear. As the surgical doors closed, Adrian remained standing motionless in the corridor, his hands still stained with Nina's blood. For 8 years he had believed she chose a life without him. Now she had nearly died, proving the opposite. And nothing about that truth felt simple anymore. If this moment touched something deep in your heart, Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join a community that believes truth, loyalty, and justice always find their way back. The red light above the operating room door remained on, casting a quiet glow over the corridor that seemed to stretch longer with every passing minute. Adrian Romano had faced negotiations worth millions without blinking, had stood across from men who measured life in calculated risk. Yet none of those moments had prepared him for the silence he now endured. The faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Somewhere deeper in the medical wing, equipment hummed steadily, machines working with mechanical certainty to hold together a life that had nearly been taken in seconds. Adrian stood motionless at first, as if leaving the spot outside the surgical doors might somehow alter the outcome. His hands were still stained dark with Nina's blood, the fabric of his sleeve stiff where it had dried. The sight of it unsettled him in ways he could not explain. Blood had never disturbed him before. Violence had always belonged to the world he inherited. But this blood felt different. This blood carried history. Daniel approached quietly, careful not to interrupt the fragile stillness surrounding his employer. "The estate is secure," Daniel reported. "All guests have been escorted out. Authorities have been informed that the situation is under control." Adrian nodded once. "Identity of the shooter?" he asked. Daniel hesitated slightly, indicating uncertainty. "Preliminary identification suggests a professional, no record yet connecting him to known external rivals." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, processing the implication. "If this wasn't external," Daniel continued carefully, "then the order came from someone with knowledge of tonight's event, someone inside." The possibility did not surprise Adrian. Leadership transitions often invited challenges from those who believed themselves more deserving. Still, the timing was deliberate. The location was calculated. Whoever had planned the attack understood the symbolic value of striking during the very night Adrian officially assumed control. "They knew exactly where I would be standing," Adrian said quietly. Daniel inclined his head in agreement. "We are reviewing all staff and temporary hires," Daniel added. Adrian's thoughts returned immediately to Nina. She had noticed danger before trained security personnel reacted. That instinct came from familiarity, not coincidence. "She saw it before anyone else," Adrian murmured. Daniel studied him carefully. "You trust her?" The question lingered between them. Trust was not a concept Adrian distributed freely. "I trusted her once," Adrian said finally. Daniel understood the distinction. Through the surgical doors, faint movement could be seen as medical staff worked with steady precision. Every passing minute increased the importance of the outcome. Adrian sat slowly in one of the chairs positioned along the corridor wall. He rarely allowed himself stillness, yet tonight movement felt meaningless. 8 years. 8 years of convincing himself that Nina had chosen ambition over loyalty. 8 years of turning disappointment into discipline. 8 years of building an identity strong enough to prevent anyone from seeing what her absence had cost him. And now she lay inside that room, her life hanging in fragile balance because she had chosen to protect him. Nothing about that aligned with the version of Nina he had forced himself to believe in. His memory returned to the final conversation they had shared before she disappeared. She had seemed distant, distracted, as though carrying a burden she refused to explain. He had assumed her hesitation meant doubt. Pride had prevented him from asking questions that might have revealed truth sooner. Instead, he had allowed silence to replace understanding. Daniel remained nearby, maintaining respectful distance. "You should consider the possibility that she returned for a reason," Daniel said carefully. Adrian's gaze remained fixed on the surgical doors. "She didn't return," Adrian replied. "She never left this world. She just chose not to be part of mine." Daniel did not challenge the statement. Several hours passed in slow progression. At one point, a nurse entered briefly to deliver additional medical supplies. Adrian observed every movement with quiet intensity, as if any small detail might reveal whether Nina would survive. Finally, the surgical light turned off. The door opened. Dr. Helena Ward stepped into the corridor, removing her gloves as she exhaled slowly. "She is stable," Helena said first. Adrian rose immediately. "The bullet near the heart caused internal bleeding, but we were able to control it," Helena continued. "Another few minutes without treatment and survival would have been unlikely." Adrian absorbed the information silently. "She is not conscious yet," Helena added. "Her body needs time to recover from shock and blood loss." Will she recover fully? Adrian asked. Helena considered her response carefully. The physical injuries should heal. The deeper wounds. She paused slightly. Those often take longer. Adrian understood what she meant. Trauma did not always appear on medical scans. When can I see her? He asked. She is being moved to recovery now, Helena replied. Inside the recovery suite, the lighting had been softened to reduce strain. Medical equipment monitored vital signs with quiet consistency. Nina lay motionless beneath a light blanket, her breathing steady but fragile. Adrian stepped inside slowly. Without the urgency of crisis, the reality of her condition became more visible. Bandages protected the injuries along her shoulder and side, carefully placed to minimize long-term damage. The faint rise and fall of her chest confirmed that life remained present, even if consciousness had not yet returned. Adrian remained standing beside the bed for several seconds before finally sitting. He studied her face carefully, noticing details time had not erased. The same calm strength, the same quiet determination. He remembered how stubborn she had always been, how she refused to accept assistance easily, how she believed dignity mattered more than comfort. He also remembered the letter, words that had convinced him she had chosen a different future. You owe me the truth, he said quietly, unsure whether she could hear him. The steady rhythm of the monitor continued unchanged. You don't get to rewrite 8 years with 4 bullets, he added, his voice lower now, carrying the weight of restrained emotion. Silence answered him. He exhaled slowly. For years, Adrian had believed control guaranteed survival. Tonight proved otherwise. Some outcomes could not be negotiated. Some answers could only be given freely. And somewhere between anger and relief, Adrian Romano realized he no longer knew which answer he feared more. When Nina finally opened her eyes, the first sensation she recognized was silence. Not the anxious silence of fear, nor the heavy silence of loneliness she had grown accustomed to over the past 8 years, but a quiet stillness that felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Her body ached with a deep, persistent pain that seemed to pulse with every breath. The weight in her chest made even the smallest movement feel like lifting stone. Soft light filtered through tall windows, pale gold against cream-colored walls. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that something terrible had happened. Then memory returned in fragments: the chandelier, the raised weapon, Adrian standing only feet away, the instinct that had moved her faster than reason. The gunfire. Her body stiffened slightly as the reality settled in. She had seen him again, and she had thrown herself into danger without hesitation. Her gaze shifted slowly across the room until she saw him. Adrian sat beside the bed, still dressed in dark clothing, though his jacket had been removed. His sleeves were rolled slightly at the wrists, revealing faint traces of dried blood that no amount of washing had completely removed. He looked as though he had not slept. He was watching her. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. For a moment neither spoke. 8 years of silence stretched between them, fragile and uncertain. You're awake, Adrian said finally, his voice low, controlled, but carrying something deeper beneath the calm. Nina attempted to sit up, but pain spread sharply through her side. Don't, he said quickly, moving closer but stopping himself before touching her. The doctor said movement will make the bleeding worse. Her eyes searched his face, trying to understand the expression she saw there. It was not anger, not entirely. You shouldn't have stayed, she said weakly, her voice rough from strain. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. You took 4 bullets meant for me, he replied. I think that earns at least one conversation. Nina looked away, her fingers tightening faintly around the edge of the blanket. I didn't expect you to recognize me, she said quietly. Adrian gave a short, humorless breath. I didn't expect to see you ever again. Silence settled between them again, heavier this time. Nina felt the weight of every decision she had made 8 years earlier pressing down on her chest. You should have let me leave, she said softly. His eyes hardened. You already did that once. The words carried no raised volume, yet they struck harder than accusation. Nina closed her eyes briefly. I never wanted to hurt you. That didn't stop you, Adrian replied. She opened her eyes again, gathering the strength she had spent years forcing herself to maintain. You think I didn't pay for that choice? She asked quietly. Adrian did not respond. You think walking away from you was easy? She continued, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to remain composed. You wrote that I wasn't worth the future you wanted, Adrian said, repeating words that had lived in his memory for nearly a decade. I wrote what I had to, she answered. His gaze sharpened. That sounds like regret, he said. That sounds like survival, she corrected softly. Adrian studied her expression carefully, searching for signs of manipulation, deception, anything that would allow him to retreat back into certainty. But what he saw instead was exhaustion, and truth that had been carried too long alone. You could have told me, he said finally. They wouldn't have allowed that, she replied. The words hung in the air. Adrian's posture shifted slightly. Who wouldn't? Nina hesitated. For years, she had protected a secret that had cost her everything. Now the cost of silence felt heavier than the risk of truth. Your parents, she said quietly. The response did not surprise him as much as it should have. He had always known his family valued legacy above sentiment. Still, hearing the words forced him to confront something he had avoided questioning. They believed I would weaken you, Nina continued, her voice steady despite the vulnerability of the confession. They believed loving me would distract you from becoming what they needed you to become. Adrian's eyes darkened. They threatened to destroy any future you had in politics, business, everything, she said. They said if I stayed, you would lose the alliances they spent decades building. His silence deepened. They didn't ask me to leave, Nina added quietly. They made sure I understood what would happen if I didn't. Adrian's fingers curled slightly against the arm of the chair. You believed them? He asked. I believed in protecting you, she answered. He stood abruptly, moving toward the window as tension filled the room. For years he had convinced himself she had chosen comfort over loyalty. Now the possibility that she had sacrificed everything challenged the foundation of that belief. You let me hate you, he said quietly. It was safer that way, she replied. For who? For you, she whispered. He turned back toward her slowly. You don't get to decide what kind of pain I'm allowed to carry. Her eyes softened. I know, she said, but I knew what your family was capable of. I couldn't be the reason they turned against you. Adrian exhaled slowly, the weight of years pressing against every thought. And now? He asked. Now they tried to kill you anyway, she said faintly. The truth settled between them. All the sacrifice, all the distance, and still the danger had come. Adrian moved closer to the bed, his voice quieter now. You almost died tonight, he said. Nina gave the faintest hint of a sad smile. I always knew loving you wasn't safe. For the first time, Adrian allowed himself to truly see her not as the woman who had abandoned him, but as the woman who had carried the burden of protecting him without recognition. You should have trusted me, he said. I did, she replied softly. I trusted the man you were becoming. The words struck something deeper than argument. Adrian remained silent for a long moment. Then he spoke with quiet certainty. You're not leaving again. Nina studied his expression carefully. You don't control everything anymore, Adrian, she said gently. No, he admitted, but I can control whether the truth stays buried. For the first time since she woke, she saw something in his eyes she had not seen in years. Not anger, not distance, resolve, and perhaps something closer to forgiveness. The morning light entered the recovery room slowly, filtered through tall glass windows that overlooked the quiet gardens of the Romano estate. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened, as if blood had not been spilled the night before, as if the past had not suddenly resurfaced in the form of a woman Adrian had spent 8 years trying to forget. Nina had not slept much after their conversation. Every breath still reminded her of the price her body had paid, but the greater weight pressing on her chest was not physical pain. It was the knowledge that the truth she had hidden for nearly a decade was no longer hers alone to carry. Adrian had left only briefly to handle urgent matters regarding the attack, but his presence still filled the room even in his absence. The faint scent of his cologne lingered, mixed with the sterile sharpness of antiseptic and the distant aroma of fresh coffee drifting in from somewhere beyond the hallway. She had not expected kindness. She had certainly not expected concern. 8 years earlier, she had accepted that walking away from Adrian meant disappearing entirely from the life they had once imagined together. She had convinced herself that if he hated her, he would be safer. Hatred created distance. Distance created protection. Yet fate had ignored every careful decision she had made. The door opened quietly, and Adrian stepped back into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one gently on the small table near the bed, though both of them knew she was not yet strong enough to drink it. I wasn't sure if you still preferred it without sugar, he said, his voice neutral, though the simple statement carried more history than either of them acknowledged openly. Nina looked at the cup, surprised by the small detail he still remembered. Some things don't change, she replied softly. Adrian nodded once, then took the chair beside her bed again. "There is something you need to understand," he said after a moment. "The man who tried to kill me did not act alone." Nina's eyes lifted immediately. "You believe your family is involved," she said quietly. "I know my family is involved," Adrian corrected. His tone carried quiet certainty. "The shooter had access to internal schedules," he continued. "He knew where I would be standing. He knew which security rotation would leave that corridor briefly exposed." Nina felt a chill move through her chest despite the warmth of the room. "Then this won't stop," she said. "No," Adrian replied calmly. "It won't." The reality settled heavily between them. "This is exactly why I left," Nina whispered. Adrian studied her carefully. "You left because you believed distance would remove danger," he said. "Yes, and yet you returned." Her expression softened slightly. "I never truly left," she said. "I just stayed far enough away that no one would think I mattered." Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. "You mattered," he said quietly. "Even when I convinced myself you didn't." The admission hung between them with unexpected weight. "I tried to build a life that made sense without you," he continued. "It was efficient, predictable, controlled, and empty," Nina said gently. He did not deny it. "For 8 years, I believed you chose safety over loyalty," Adrian said. "Last night proved the opposite." Nina lowered her gaze briefly. "I didn't choose safety," she said. "I chose the only option your parents left me." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of them. "They believed love would weaken you," she continued. "They believed attachment creates vulnerability. They said a leader must never give enemies a way to hurt him. And they were willing to hurt you to prove that point," Adrian replied quietly. Nina did not answer directly. Instead, she asked the question she had been avoiding since she woke. "What happens now?" Adrian's response came without hesitation. "You stay here until I determine who ordered the attack." "That sounds less like protection and more like confinement," she said carefully. "It sounds like survival," he corrected. Her eyes searched his face, recognizing the strategic calculation she remembered so well. "I didn't come back to become part of your world again," she said. "You never stopped being part of it," Adrian replied. She inhaled slowly, feeling the sharp reminder of her injuries. "I came back because I heard rumors something was wrong," she admitted. "People were talking about shifts inside the organization. Quiet alliances changing. Your name mentioned in conversations that didn't feel respectful." "You risked your life based on rumors?" Adrian asked. "I trusted my instincts," she answered. His expression softened slightly. "You always did." A brief silence passed. "There is something else," Nina added quietly. Adrian waited. "The night I left, your father didn't just threaten my future," she said. "He threatened yours." Adrian's eyes darkened. "He said if I stayed, certain partnerships would disappear," she continued. "Investors would withdraw. Political relationships would collapse. He said your leadership would be questioned before it even began." Adrian understood the implication immediately. "They created the obstacle so they could later claim I overcame it," he said. "Yes," Nina replied, "and I allowed myself to believe you were the obstacle," he finished. The realization left a bitter taste neither of them could ignore. "I thought distance would protect you," she said quietly. Adrian's voice lowered. "Distance protected no one." Nina studied his expression carefully. "You're not angry?" she asked. "I was angry for 8 years," he replied calmly. "Now I'm interested in the truth. And the truth is complicated," she said. "Most things worth understanding are," Adrian replied. He stood slowly, moving toward the window, as morning light grew stronger across the garden paths. "The person responsible for last night will reveal themselves," he said. "People who believe power is slipping tend to act impatiently." "And when you find them?" Nina asked. Adrian's reflection in the glass appeared colder again, shaped by the world he commanded. "I will decide whether justice requires silence or exposure." Nina recognized the meaning behind the words. Justice in Adrian's world did not always resemble the kind described in courtrooms. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he added quietly. She looked at him, uncertain whether the statement was reassurance or warning. "I never fought alone," she replied gently. "I just never let you see the battle." For the first time, Adrian allowed the faintest trace of regret to cross his expression. "That ends now," he said. Outside, the morning continued peacefully, unaware that decisions forming inside the Romano estate would soon determine the future of more than one life. The past had resurfaced, and this time, Neither of them intended to let it remain buried. Adrian had learned that truth rarely arrived all at once. It revealed itself in fragments, often when least expected, often when the consequences could no longer be avoided. By the afternoon of the second day, the Romano estate had returned to its usual rhythm of quiet control, yet beneath the polished surface, tension moved like an unseen current. Nina had regained enough strength to sit upright for short periods, though every movement reminded her of how close she had come to death. The bandages beneath her clothing pulled slightly each time she inhaled deeply, a physical reminder of a decision she did not regret, yet could not fully explain even to herself. Adrian entered the room carrying a thin leather folder. His expression revealed nothing, but Nina recognized the intensity behind the calm surface. He closed the door quietly before speaking. "I had Daniel review security footage from the last 3 weeks," he said, placing the folder carefully on the small table beside her bed. Nina watched him closely. "And?" she asked. Adrian opened the folder and slid several printed images forward. "You were right to come back," he said. The images showed unfamiliar men appearing repeatedly near the estate perimeter, sometimes disguised as delivery personnel, sometimes walking past the outer gates without reason. Their presence had been subtle, carefully spaced to avoid drawing suspicion. "Who are they?" Nina asked. Adrian did not immediately answer. "They are connected to Victor Caruso," he said finally. The name settled heavily between them. Caruso was not merely an outsider competitor. He was family, a distant cousin who had long believed he deserved a greater share of influence within the Romano organization. "He has been building support quietly," Adrian continued. "Financial pressure, private alliances, promises of restructuring once leadership changes." "And the attack?" Nina asked. "Likely intended as a message," Adrian said. Nina felt the quiet weight of realization. "If he removes you before the transition is complete, he creates uncertainty," she said slowly. "Uncertainty creates opportunity." Adrian inclined his head slightly. "You understand the structure better than most," he observed. "I lived close enough to see how power really works," she replied. Silence settled briefly. Adrian closed the folder. "There is something else you need to know," he said. Nina studied him carefully. "I confronted my father this morning," Adrian continued. Her posture stiffened instinctively. "And?" she asked cautiously. "He did not deny meeting you 8 years ago," Adrian replied. Nina lowered her gaze. "I didn't expect him to," she said quietly. "He said the decision was necessary," Adrian continued, his voice steady but colder now. "He believes leadership requires emotional isolation." Nina gave a faint, sad smile. "He always did believe love was a liability." Adrian did not smile. "He believes you were a distraction." "And now?" she asked. "Now he believes your presence is a complication," Adrian answered. The choice of words did not escape her. "Complication," she repeated softly. "Yes." Nina looked toward the window, gathering strength before speaking again. "Your mother was kinder," she said carefully. "She didn't threaten directly." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "What did she say?" "She said every powerful family makes sacrifices the public never sees," Nina replied. "She said if I loved you, I would allow you to become the man history required." Adrian's expression darkened. "History required obedience," he said. Nina did not argue. "They believed they were protecting legacy," she said. "They were protecting control," Adrian corrected. The room grew quiet again. For years, Adrian had accepted the idea that personal sacrifice was necessary for leadership. He had built his identity on discipline, precision, and emotional restraint. But now he faced the possibility that the greatest loss of his life had not been inevitable, it had been orchestrated. "You never tried to contact me," he said finally. Nina's eyes met his. "They made it clear that if I reached out, they would ensure the consequences affected more than just me," she answered. Adrian understood the implication immediately. "Your family," he said. She nodded. "My father's business licenses were suddenly under investigation. My brother's student loans were called into question. Every connection I had became vulnerable overnight." Adrian exhaled slowly. "They applied pressure from every direction," he said. "Yes, and you believed disappearing would end the pressure." "It did," she replied. He studied her carefully. "And what did it cost you?" She hesitated. "Everything that mattered," she said quietly. The admission lingered between them. Adrian walked slowly to the far side of the room, considering information that reframed nearly a decade of anger. "You allowed me to believe you abandoned me," he said. "Yes." "You allowed me to hate you." "Yes." And you accepted that as permanent. I accepted that you would live, she replied. Her answer left no space for argument. Adrian rested one hand against the back of a chair, his posture reflecting controlled tension. For 8 years, I believed I was building strength, he said quietly. Now I realize I was building walls around a lie. Nina watched him carefully. You became stronger, she said, but strength without truth becomes isolation. Adrian turned slightly toward her. And now the truth creates vulnerability, he replied. Yes, she agreed softly. Caruso believes internal division weakens leadership, Adrian said. He may not be entirely wrong. Nina's expression grew serious. What will you do? Adrian's voice remained calm. I will allow him to believe he has time. And meanwhile? She asked. I prepare. She recognized the tone. It was the same voice he used years ago when negotiating difficult outcomes. You cannot protect everyone, she said gently. No, he agreed, but I can decide who deserves protection. Their eyes met again, the unspoken meaning clear. Nina shifted slightly, wincing faintly at the lingering pain in her side. You should not involve me further, she said. Adrian's response came without hesitation. You are already involved. I never intended to change your world again, she replied. You didn't, he said quietly. You revealed the truth about the world I was already living in. Nina absorbed the words slowly. Justice does not always look clean, Adrian continued. Sometimes it requires confronting the people who taught you how to define it. You mean your parents? She said. I mean the system that taught me loyalty without question, he corrected. She nodded faintly. And now? Now I ask different questions. Outside the window, clouds began gathering slowly across the late afternoon sky, shadows stretching across the gardens. Change rarely announced itself loudly. Often it began quietly, in rooms where truth could no longer be ignored. For the first time in years, Adrian Romano no longer viewed the past as something finished. It had returned with consequences neither of them could avoid, and this time, neither of them intended to face it alone. The storm arrived earlier than expected. Dark clouds gathered over the Romano estate as evening approached, swallowing the last traces of sunlight and casting long shadows across the stone terraces. The air carried the scent of approaching rain, heavy and electric, as though nature itself sensed the tension tightening within the walls of the family's legacy. Inside the estate, movement remained controlled but purposeful. Security presence had doubled since the attack, their quiet vigilance blending into the architecture of power that had protected the Romano name for generations. No announcement had been made publicly about the shooting. Officially, the gala had ended early due to an unforeseen disturbance. In reality, every trusted ally understood that something far more dangerous had begun. Adrian stood in his private office, reviewing documents illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp, financial reports, communication logs, internal schedules. Every detail now carried new meaning. Betrayal within a family rarely revealed itself openly. It disguised itself as loyalty until the moment power shifted. Daniel entered without knocking, a silent privilege earned through years of proven discretion. Caruso met with 3 council members yesterday evening, Daniel reported. Location was private, no digital records. Adrian did not look up immediately. And the council members, he asked. They deny any formal agreement, Daniel replied. But their financial movements suggest otherwise. Adrian closed the folder in front of him. Money always leaves fingerprints, he said calmly. Daniel nodded. There is more, he added. 2 additional individuals have been placed near the estate perimeter within the past 12 hours. Surveillance? Likely. Adrian stood slowly, moving toward the tall window overlooking the distant tree line. They are testing reaction time, he said. Measuring response patterns. Daniel remained silent, allowing Adrian space to think. Caruso believes uncertainty will weaken internal confidence, Adrian continued. He assumes hesitation will create opportunity. And will it? Daniel asked carefully. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. No. Across the estate, Nina walked slowly along the interior corridor with measured steps, still adjusting to the physical weakness that followed trauma. Each breath reminded her of the fragile distance between survival and absence. The medical staff had advised rest, but stillness allowed her thoughts to wander toward questions she could no longer ignore. She paused near a large window overlooking the garden. Rain had begun to fall lightly, tapping softly against the glass in irregular rhythm. The quiet sound stirred memories she had buried carefully. 8 years earlier, She had stood beneath similar rain the night she left Adrian's apartment for the last time. She had not allowed herself to cry then. Emotion would have weakened her resolve. The decision had required precision, distance, and silence. Love had not disappeared. It had been sacrificed. Footsteps approached behind her. "You should not be walking without assistance yet," Adrian said quietly. She turned slightly, offering a faint smile. "I was never very good at following medical instructions," she replied. Adrian stopped beside her, maintaining respectful distance. "The storm will pass quickly," he said, glancing toward the darkening sky. "Storms rarely pass without consequence," Nina answered softly. He studied her expression carefully. "You remember this world better than you pretend to," he observed. "I remember enough," she said. Adrian's tone shifted slightly. "Caruso is preparing something." Her gaze sharpened. "He always preferred indirect methods," she said. "He likes creating pressure until someone makes a mistake." Adrian nodded faintly. "He believes you are that mistake." Nina did not react immediately. "He thinks my presence weakens your authority," she said. "Yes. And what do you think?" Adrian answered without hesitation. "I think your presence reveals truth." She looked at him carefully. "Truth can be dangerous," she said. "So can lies," he replied. Lightning flashed briefly in the distance, illuminating the garden in stark contrast before darkness returned. Nina rested her hand lightly against the window frame for support. "You should send me away," she said quietly. "Distance will remove his leverage." Adrian's expression remained still. "No. You cannot protect both your leadership and me at the same time," she continued. "He will force a choice." "I already made that choice 8 years ago," Adrian said calmly. She turned toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means I allowed someone else to decide what mattered," he replied. "That mistake will not repeat itself." Nina studied his face carefully, searching for hesitation. She found none. "You are not the same man I left," she said. "No," Adrian agreed. "And you are not the same woman who walked away." Silence settled between them, but this time it did not feel heavy. It felt inevitable. Later that evening, Adrian entered the private council chamber where several senior family members had gathered informally under the pretense of discussing logistical adjustments following the interrupted gala. The long wooden table carried decades of history carved into its surface, each generation leaving decisions that shaped the next. Caruso sat among them, composed, observant, careful not to reveal urgency. "My condolences regarding the incident," Caruso said smoothly as Adrian entered. "It is unfortunate timing." "Timing is rarely accidental," Adrian replied calmly. Caruso offered a polite smile. "Perhaps increased security is necessary. Perhaps loyalty is necessary," Adrian answered. The subtle tension in the room shifted. Caruso leaned slightly back in his chair. "We all want stability," he said. "Stability requires honesty," Adrian replied. No direct accusation was spoken, yet every person present understood the meaning behind the exchange. Power rarely needed raised voices. After the meeting ended, Adrian returned to the corridor where Nina waited near the library entrance. "What did he say?" she asked. "Nothing that could be proven," Adrian replied. "Then the game continues," she said quietly. "Yes." She hesitated before speaking again. "He will not stop." "No," Adrian agreed. "And if he escalates?" Adrian's gaze remained steady. "Then the truth will no longer remain private." Nina understood what that meant. Exposure, consequences, the dismantling of carefully constructed illusions. "Justice rarely arrives loudly," she said softly. "But when it does," Adrian replied, "it changes everything." Outside, the rain intensified, tapping steadily against the glass as the night deepened. The storm had not yet reached its strongest point, and neither had the conflict that waited just beyond silence. The following evening, the Romano estate felt different, not visibly different to an outsider. Not in the polished marble floors or the disciplined movement of staff, but in the quiet shift of awareness that passed between those who understood power. Conversations were shorter. Eye contact lasted longer. Subtle alliances adjusted without announcement. Adrian had requested a formal council assembly. The decision alone sent a clear message. Family councils were not called without reason. Inside the long chamber lined with dark oak panels, portraits of past Romano leaders watched silently from the walls, reminders that legacy was built not through comfort but through survival. Every man seated at the table represented decades of loyalty, influence, and calculated compromise. Every decision made in this room shaped futures far beyond the estate gates. Caruso arrived precisely on time, always controlled, always composed. His calm demeanor had helped him build quiet support among those who believed Adrian's leadership style might eventually reduce certain traditional practices that had defined the family for generations. Nina remained in the adjacent study, not officially part of the council, yet close enough to observe without being seen. Adrian had insisted she remain within protected space. He no longer intended to allow others to dictate the terms of her presence. The council meeting began with routine matters, financial projections, shipping routes, contract renewals, all spoken in the neutral tone of business. Then Adrian shifted the direction of the conversation. "There was an attempt on my life 48 hours ago," he said calmly. "No one reacted openly, but the air changed. The attack occurred within this estate," Adrian continued, "which means someone with knowledge of internal structure provided access." Silence settled heavily across the room. Caruso leaned forward slightly, resting his hands calmly on the table. "That is a serious accusation," he said smoothly. "It is a serious reality," Adrian replied. "We all want stability," another council member added cautiously. "And stability requires loyalty," Adrian said. Caruso offered a small nod. "Of course." Adrian placed a thin folder on the table and opened it deliberately. Photographs, financial transactions, communication logs, patterns of movement that revealed coordination rather than coincidence. The shooter had contact with intermediaries connected to Victor Caruso's shipping investments, Adrian said without raising his voice. Caruso's expression did not change. "Circumstantial," he replied. "Perhaps," Adrian agreed, "until we consider the timing of your recent meetings with certain council members." Subtle tension spread across the room. Caruso smiled faintly. "You believe conversation is conspiracy?" "I believe patterns reveal intention," Adrian answered. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Caruso leaned back in his chair. "And if I wished leadership," he said calmly, "I would pursue it openly." "Open pursuit requires courage," Adrian replied quietly. The statement landed with quiet weight. Caruso's eyes narrowed slightly. "You imply cowardice?" "I imply impatience," Adrian said. The room grew colder. Caruso folded his hands together. "You have changed since the last time we spoke privately," he said. "Yes," Adrian replied. "I have." Caruso's gaze sharpened. "Influence can weaken discipline," he said carefully. "Truth strengthens discipline," Adrian answered. The indirect reference to Nina did not go unnoticed. Caruso shifted his tone. "Your personal attachments create vulnerability," he said. "History proves leaders who allow emotional interference rarely maintain stability. History also proves leaders who fear loyalty rarely inspire it," Adrian replied. The exchange carried more meaning than the words themselves. Caruso's strategy relied on the belief that Adrian's past relationship would appear as weakness in the eyes of traditionalists. Instead, Adrian allowed the silence to speak. "I will not pretend emotional isolation creates strength," Adrian continued calmly. "It creates distance. Distance creates fear. Fear creates betrayal." Several council members exchanged subtle glances. Caruso studied Adrian carefully. "You intend to redefine tradition," he said. "I intend to refine it," Adrian corrected. The distinction mattered. Adrian stood slowly, allowing the room to feel the shift in authority. "The Romano family survives because each generation adapts without abandoning its core," he said. "Loyalty, protection, discipline." He paused briefly. "But loyalty must be mutual." The words settled deeply. Caruso tapped one finger lightly against the table. "And what do you propose?" he asked. Adrian met his gaze directly. "I propose transparency within leadership." Caruso smiled faintly. "A dangerous word." "A necessary one," Adrian replied. No direct accusation was made regarding Nina. No explicit defense of her presence was offered. Yet every person present understood the deeper message. Adrian would not allow private manipulation to dictate public leadership. After the council dispersed, Caruso remained seated a moment longer. "You surprise me," he said quietly. "I rarely aim to be predictable," Adrian replied. Caruso stood slowly. "You believe clarity will strengthen your position," he said. "I believe truth removes unnecessary shadows," Adrian answered. Caruso gave a small nod. "We will see whether truth satisfies those who prefer tradition. Tradition without integrity becomes performance." Adrian replied. Caruso's expression remained calm, but the subtle tightening of his jaw revealed calculation. As he exited the chamber, the storm outside intensified, rain striking the tall windows with steady force. Nina waited in the adjoining room, her posture composed, despite the tension she could sense even without hearing every word. "Well?" she asked quietly when Adrian entered. He expected hesitation, Adrian said. And instead, he received clarity. Nina studied his face carefully. "That will force him to act sooner," she said. "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "Then the danger increases." "Yes." "Are you prepared for that?" Adrian's voice remained calm. "I am prepared to stop allowing others to define what matters." Nina's eyes softened slightly. "You always cared more than you allowed yourself to show," she said. Adrian looked toward the rain moving across the garden paths. "Caring was never the problem," he said quietly. "Trust was." "And now?" she asked. "Now trust must be rebuilt where it was deliberately broken." The storm outside continued steadily, washing the stone pathways clean beneath dim evening lights. Some storms destroyed, others revealed what remained strong enough to survive. The rain had stopped before dawn, leaving the Romano estate wrapped in a quiet stillness that felt almost ceremonial. The stone pathways glistened beneath the early light, reflecting pale gold tones as the sun slowly rose beyond the distant line of trees. The storm had passed, but its presence lingered in the cool air, as though reminding everyone that change rarely arrived gently. Inside the estate, the atmosphere carried a subtle shift. Victor Caruso had not openly challenged Adrian after the council meeting, but silence itself often revealed more than words. Financial channels previously controlled by Caruso's intermediaries had begun to slow. Certain communications had ceased entirely. The invisible tension that had been building beneath the family structure was beginning to settle into something more stable, though no one would yet call it resolved. Adrian stood alone in the garden courtyard, reviewing the morning reports delivered quietly by Daniel. The attempted fracture within the organization had not disappeared, but its urgency had weakened. Caruso's support depended on uncertainty, and uncertainty had been replaced by clarity. "Several council members have reaffirmed their loyalty," Daniel said. "Caruso has reduced his external contacts significantly." Adrian nodded slightly. "He understands the consequences of escalation," Adrian said. "For now," Daniel replied. "For now is sufficient," Adrian answered. Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "She is awake," he said. Adrian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Is she strong enough to walk?" he asked. "Yes." Adrian dismissed the remaining reports and moved toward the interior corridor. Nina stood near the tall windows overlooking the east garden, dressed simply in neutral colors provided by the estate staff. The bandages beneath her clothing remained, but her posture had regained the quiet strength Adrian remembered from years before. The morning light softened the faint paleness that still marked her recovery. "You should not be standing too long," Adrian said gently as he approached. "I needed to feel the air," she replied. "Hospitals remind me too much of waiting for answers." Adrian stopped beside her. "The doctors are satisfied with your progress," he said. "Full recovery will take time. I have had 8 years to practice patience," she answered softly. A small silence settled between them, but it no longer felt uncomfortable. "What happens now?" she asked after a moment. Adrian did not respond immediately. "The council has accepted the transition," he said finally. "Caruso will not challenge openly." "And privately?" she asked. "Privately, he understands the cost has increased," Adrian replied. Nina studied his expression carefully. "You chose exposure over silence," she said. "I chose stability over fear," he corrected. She nodded faintly. "You changed the rules," she observed. "I clarified them," he said. The distinction mattered. Nina turned slightly toward the garden, watching the faint movement of leaves stirred by morning breeze. "For years I believed protecting you meant disappearing," she said quietly. Adrian's gaze remained steady. "For years I believed strength meant forgetting," he replied. Neither belief had brought peace. "I never stopped following your life," Nina admitted after a pause. Quietly, carefully, enough to know when something felt wrong. Adrian looked at her. "You should have trusted me," he said gently. "I trusted the future you were meant to have," she answered. "And that future did not include you?" "I believed loving you meant stepping aside," she said. Adrian considered her words. "Love that requires silence becomes distortion," he said quietly. Her eyes softened. I know that now. A faint breeze moved through the open corridor, carrying the scent of damp earth and early spring. For 8 years I told myself that hating you made the loss easier, Adrian admitted. And did it? She asked. No. The honesty settled between them without resistance. I don't expect forgiveness, Nina said. Forgiveness is not the same as understanding, Adrian replied. And understanding? She asked carefully. Requires truth, he answered. Nina lowered her gaze briefly. Then here is the truth, she said softly. Leaving you was the hardest decision I have ever made. Staying away was harder. Adrian did not look away. You nearly died protecting me, he said. I chose that, she replied. Why? Because some choices don't disappear simply because time passes, she answered. The simplicity of her response carried more weight than explanation. Adrian reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and removed the small velvet box he had carried for years. He opened it slowly. The silver necklace rested inside, unchanged by time. Nina's breath caught faintly at the sight of it. You kept it, she said quietly. I kept the truth, Adrian replied. He held the box out toward her. I never replaced what it represented, he continued. I only convinced myself it had been taken from me. Nina hesitated before accepting it, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the cool metal surface. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. Adrian's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes softened. Love does not erase consequence, he said gently. I know, she replied, but consequence does not erase truth, he continued. Nina looked up at him slowly. Does this mean I stay? She asked carefully. This means the decision will not be made by fear, Adrian answered. Her lips curved faintly in the smallest hint of relief. For the first time, she said quietly, that feels like freedom. Adrian allowed himself the faintest trace of a smile. Freedom is rarely given, he said. It is usually chosen. Nina closed her fingers gently around the necklace. And what do you choose? She asked. Adrian's gaze remained steady. I choose honesty, he said. The garden beyond the windows seemed brighter now, sunlight reflecting softly across stone paths still damp from the storm. The past had not disappeared. The dangers surrounding them had not vanished. But something essential had shifted. Not power, not control, trust. And sometimes, trust was the quietest form of justice. This story reminds us that true love is not proven through comfort, but through sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest acts of loyalty happen in silence, unseen, and unrecognized for years. The world often teaches that power requires emotional distance, yet real strength comes from the courage to protect what truly matters. Fear, pride, and misunderstanding can separate people, but truth has a quiet way of returning when the time is right. Justice is not always loud, and forgiveness is rarely simple. But when honesty replaces deception, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. In the end, the story shows that loyalty is not about possession, but about choosing each other again, even after pain, even after time, even after everything seems lost. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.